We're going to continue exploring Unetaneh Tokef through the lens of this leitmotif of the guiding word and the guiding root, Ayin Bet Resh Over, which is it's a fascinating word in and of itself, which we're going to be able to explore a little bit tomorrow. But I want to continue with our references today, just to remind us where we came from yesterday. We saw two uses of the word, V'chol ba'ei olam ovrim lefanecha kivnei marom, that the first was everybody in the whole universe passes before you, either like a flock of sheep or like soldiers passing before, like in military formation. And that sort of sets up one view of God and one view of us, in which, we are attempting to be just like everybody else, and we don't stand out as individuals. And we're sort of, looking to just make it through under the military review. That's sort of one view that comes up in the reference here to the Mishnah in Rosh Hashanah. And then we saw towards the end of yesterday the view that in the prophecy from Yechezkel, there's a view that whose day of judgment is it? It's actually not the day of judgment of angels or everybody in the universe, but rather the corrupt leaders who are, shirking their responsibilities to take care of the flock. They are the shepherds who have not tended the flock and instead have just made themselves fat, and have, neglected the poor and the needy. And instead, God is coming in as the shepherd, and God is going to be the one who kivakarat roe edro, like a shepherd who tends his flock. He's going to look after the missing sheep and is going to take care of everybody in a way that the corrupt leaders are unable to do. So when I say to you, the day of judgment is coming, do you hear I'm being judged, or in which case you're terrified like the angels? Or do you hear the day of judgment is coming? Oh, great! That's when the corrupt leaders will be judged and will be finally through with their rule, and God will step in and make things more just. So that's already we have two understandings of what's even happening here on the day of judgment, and both of those are just following the lead of the root avar to get to these other references. So we're going to see two other examples of the references that come out of this root today, and explore both of those. And again, just to remind us, the reason we're looking at the root avar is because the poet switches out from the original midrash when it says the tshuva and tefillah and tzedakah will cancel a harsh decree, mivatlin. He puts in the word ma'avirin, cause to pass. And that's what I'm arguing is the opportunity for us to sort of realize, oh, he's playing with the word over, and so I should check out the references that sort of appear as a result of that root and that term. And indeed, it shows up 7 times in the poem, which itself is a literary signal that there's something going on with that word. V'chol ba'ei olam ya'avrun lefanecha kivnei maron. All went to the world shall pass before him like sheep. That was the mission of Rosh Hashanah. Kivakarat roe edro, as a shepherd who searches his flock. That's the reference in Yechezkel. And now we're going to see ma'avir sono tachat shifto, passing his sheep under his staff. Ma'avir sono, to cause to pass the sheep under his staff. So what is that referring to? So let's scroll down here through the poem and get the reference here. I just actually brought it so we can see it as a little section on top of page 4. So we're at the second line, Ma'avir tzono tachat shifto. This comes from a little section at the end of Vayikra, at the end of the book of Leviticus, in which we get the following rule: V'chol ma'asar bakar batzon kol asher ya'avor tachat hashavet. So all the tithes of the herd or the flock, the bakar, the cattle, and the so on, and the sheep, of all that passes under the shepherd's staff, ha'asiri yihyeh kodesh lashem. The 10th one shall be holy unto Hashem. Okay, so this is the sort of instruction of how you separate out the animal tithe, the 10% that you donate, as opposed to using for your own use. he must, now this is sort of interesting because you might say, okay, great, I get it. I'm going to donate 10% of my flock to God. I'm going to make it Kodesh. I'm going to make it holy and consecrated, set aside. But then we get this sort of strange instruction in the next verse. Lo yivaker bein tov lara. You may not actually discriminate. You may not look out, is how JPS translated, but levaker, like boker, when you see in the morning, when you discriminate something, when you can tell the difference between something and something else. So you may not do that. You may not distinguish between good and bad. Velo yimiredo, and you may not make substitution for it. In other words, how do you separate out the tithe? You count all the sheep pass under the staff, counting 1, 2, 3, etc. The Mishnah actually describes on the 10th one, you put a red stripe on it. So you're just counting the sheep as they pass under the staff. And you're not allowed to distinguish, you're not allowed to set them up to sort of jimmy the system so that you end up, saying, oh, I want this sort of runt sheep. That's the one I'm going to give over to the temple. Or you might be sort of pious and say, I want this fat sheep. That's the one I want to give over to the temple. No, you actually don't have any agency in deciding which sheep gets set aside as Kodesh. Rather, it's just random. You count off under the staff as they all walk through one by one, and the 10th one is marked. And in fact, if you do try to change the system, if he does make substitution for it, like if he's like, oh, this was the sheep I didn't want to make Kodesh, so let me just substitute it and put this sheep in instead. If you do make substitution for it, then it and its substitute shall both be holy, right? You actually can't undo the system of every 10th one randomly becomes Kodesh Lashem. And if you try to do it, then you're just punished by having both of them set aside as Kodesh. Lo yigael, it cannot be redeemed. You cannot pay for it or figure out some way of substituting it. So there's really no way around the marking of the 10th sheep as the one that's Kodesh Lashem. And then this is the last verse of the book of Vayikra. These are the commandments that Hashem gave Moses for the Israelite people on Har Sinai. So how do we apply this to our experience of God on the high holidays? Well, so much of the imagery of the high holidays is God opens up the book, looks at the deeds, and decides based on your deeds whether you will live or you will die. But we have in this image actually a very different conception of what might be going on here, which is to say, sometimes the decisions that are made about us as we pass under Ma'avir Tzono Tachat Shifto, as we pass under the staff, are not based on Tov and Ra. They're not based on good and bad, but rather it's just sometimes random, right? As we learned from the great prophet Lin-Manuel Miranda, death doesn't discriminate between the sinner and the saint, right? Sometimes it's just, there's a random system that's playing out here, and whoever's passing under the shevet, under the staff, number 10, is marked with the red mark. Now, you could also say, is Kodesh Lashem also like a bad thing or a good thing? Like, is being set aside for being holy, something that is great, or something that takes you out of your normal day-to-day life. So that's also something that the Midrash plays around with, actually specifically for Nadav and Avihu, for the children of Aaron who brought strange fire and are sort of struck down. But some Midrashim see that as a negative, like a mark on them, and some see it as a positive, like they were so wrapped up in this dedication of the Mishkan, so they were brought closer to God, through that action. So it depends on how you're thinking about this. But what I wanted to introduce into the system of how we conceive of God, even in this poem, which starts off again very scary. Of how am I supposed to make it through Judgment Day? Even the angels can't make it through Judgment Day. What possible good deeds could I have to survive another year? And this is just a hint, sort of like an allusion to a system in which, sometimes it doesn't work on a system of good and bad, but rather there's sort of a randomness that comes through as you pass through or under the staff. Ma'avir Tzono Tachat Shifto. So again, that could be comforting or scary in its own right, but I wanted to introduce that as another possible view of what it means to pass before God that's brought to us through this reference to the verse in Leviticus. So again, just scrolling up to the line in the poem, we see Ma'avir tzono tachat shifto, as passing his sheep under his staff, takes us to this set of verses in Vayikra. Okay, let's take a look at the last in this sort of rat-a-tat-tat version of the over root that comes in the poem. So Ma'avir tzono tachat shifto, Kain ta'avir v'tispor v'timneh v'tifkod nefesh kol chai. So it's sort of the metaphor, just like a shepherd passes the flock under his staff, so too may you ta'avir. So too will you cause to pass and record and recount and review every living thing. So now this is not a surprise because we've been learning this now for a couple of days, that this is also a reference and a reference to a different part of the Bible in the book of Jeremiah, one of the famous prophecies of the future time in Jeremiah. And let's take a look at that. I'm scrolling down to the last page on page 5. So this is Jeremiah chapter 33. Thus says Hashem, Od yishama b'makom hazeh, again shall be heard in this place, which you say is ruined without man or beast. Okay, and the imagery of no animals is going to be important for this selection. In the towns of Judah and the streets of Jerusalem that are desolate, without people, without inhabitants, without beast, ume'en behema, what are you going to hear? And this is familiar from the wedding ceremony. Kol sason v'kol simcha, kol chatan v'kol kala. Right? You're going to hear the voice of mirth and gladness, the voice of bridegroom and bride, the voice of those who cry, Hodu et Adonai tzvaot ki tov. Give thanks to Adonai of hosts, for Adonai is good, his kindness is everlasting. Ki le'olam chasto. This is what's going to happen in a time where everything is desolate and destroyed. In the future, you think this is a forever destruction. Jeremiah was prophesying at the time of the destruction. You think this is a forever, but in the future, actually, you're going to hear again the voice of celebration, the voice of people. For I will restore the fortunes of the land as of old, says Hashem. Thus says, and the prophecy continues, Od yihiyeh b'makom hazeh, in this ruined place, without man and beast, and in all its towns, there shall again be a pasture for shepherds where they can rest their flock. Neve ro'im marbitzim son. So again, the flock here, the sheep, is a sign of renewed life after destruction, just like the sound of a bride and a bridegroom celebrating in a place that was formerly destroyed, which you couldn't ever imagine anybody having any joy. Now we also get another image of that, which is the shepherd tending to his flock. That is a symbol of something that is the opposite of destruction. It's the sign of something that is being renewed. And then we get our sentence: in the towns of the hill country, in the towns of the Shfela, in the towns of the Negev, in the land of Binyamin, and in the environs of Jerusalem, and in the towns of Yehuda, Ba'arei Yehuda, Od ta'avorna hatzon al yedei moneh, Amar Hashem. The sheep shall again pass under the hands of one who counts them. So again, our what we have as our reference in the poem is Kain ta'avir v'tispor v'timneh. So too you will cause to pass and record and count v'timneh moneh. So that's just drawing again from the end of the prophecy in Jeremiah. Od ta'avorna, there's our word, our root, ayin bet resh. Od ta'avorna, in the future, again, it will be that the sheep shall pass under the hand of the counter. So we have here another vision of not only a God who is judging us right now, but it's sort of the beginning of the poem was the ultimate day of judgment, right? B'shafar gadol yitaka, on the great day, with the great shofar sounded, that sort of like in the future judgment. So now we get a sort of comforting imagery of the future in which, kol sason v'kol simcha, in which there's voice of bridegroom and bride, and in which the sheep is going to pass under the staff and be counted again. That is a symbol and a sign of God restoring our fortunes and bringing a future time that right now, in this destroyed present, we can't imagine. But in the future, it's going to be much, much better. So that's another vision that comes out of the reference from the poem We're going to join in tomorrow again and get a couple more visions of how this root is being used in the poem to just complicate our view of God. And I will see you tomorrow.